He used to say, "A friend like me, you'll never find twice." Back then, I believed him. Maybe I believed too much. It all started on a rainy night when my phone buzzed with a message. Just one line. Nothing dramatic, nothing threatening. But something about it felt wrong. The sender's name made my stomach twist. My best friend. The man I trusted more than my own brother. The message was short, casual, almost too casual. "Don't worry about tomorrow. I'll handle it." At first, I brushed it off. That's who he was. Confident, always in control, always stepping in when I needed him. But the tone was different this time. It wasn't reassurance. It was ownership. And suddenly I felt it. A chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Because tomorrow wasn't just any day. Tomorrow was everything. My deal, my future, my hard work. And yet here he was, claiming it like it was his own. I stared at the screen, replaying every laugh we shared, every late-night talk, every promise he ever made. They used to feel unshakable, but now they felt like cracks on glass. You don't notice them at first, but one wrong move and everything shatters. And that night, for the very first time, I asked myself a question I never thought I would. Had my best friend been betraying me all along? What I didn't know was that this message was only the beginning, and the storm that followed would leave neither of us the same. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Sleep had been impossible. That message kept replaying in my head, like a song stuck on repeat. When I walked into the office, I saw him, sitting in my chair. Not across the desk, not waiting for me, but in my chair, leaning back like he owned the place. "Morning?" he said with that familiar smile. But behind that smile, something felt off. I tried to shake it. After all, this was my best friend. The man who had been with me since the start. We built everything together. We celebrated together. He was the first to show up when I was down, the first to remind me that we were unstoppable. But as I looked at him now, I couldn't ignore the small things. The way his eyes darted to the papers on my desk. The way his hand rested on the contract I had been working on for months. The way his tone carried a weight I couldn't quite explain. "Don't worry about the meeting," he said, flipping through the pages like they were his. "I already made some calls." "Some calls?" My heart sank. I hadn't asked him to make calls. I hadn't told him he could. Yet he spoke like it was already decided, like I didn't even exist in this equation. I wanted to confront him right there, but something stopped me. A voice in my head whispered, "Don't show your hand too early." So instead, I smiled back, forced, tight, and I said, "Good, I trust you." He leaned forward, and for a moment, I saw it, a flicker in his eyes. Not friendship, not loyalty, something darker, something sharper. That's when I realized I was standing at a crossroads. Either I believed in the man I thought I knew, or I accepted the possibility that he wasn't who I believed at all. And once that door opened in my mind, there was no closing it. Every laugh we shared began to sound different. Every memory felt stained. And as I walked out of that office pretending nothing was wrong, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If my best friend was capable of betraying me, then he was already halfway there. But what I was about to discover would make betrayal look like child's play, because his plan had been in motion far longer than I ever realized. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling. I sat alone at my desk long after everyone else had gone home, staring at the contract he had touched that morning. My signature line stared back at me, blank and waiting. The silence of the office was heavy, almost suffocating. The hum of the air conditioner, the faint ticking of the clock, everything felt louder than it should. Then, I noticed something. A small corner of the contract was folded, like someone had marked it. I leaned in. My stomach tightened. It wasn't random. The fold lined up perfectly with a clause, one I had never agreed to: profit redistribution. The kind of clause that would shift control, quietly, legally, permanently. My chest tightened as I read it again, over and over. And then a chill ran through me. That clause? wasn't mine. I hadn't written it. I hadn't approved it. That's when it hit me. Someone had changed the contract, and I didn't need to guess who. I pushed the papers aside and sat back in my chair, trying to calm the storm in my head. It was almost impossible. Every memory with him replayed itself, but in reverse, like my brain was digging through every detail I'd overlooked. The late-night emails he told me not to worry about. The meetings he said were too boring for me to attend. The times he handled things before I even asked. All those moments that once looked like loyalty now looked like setup. Still, I wasn't ready to accuse him. Not yet. If I was right, he was playing a dangerous game. And in games like this, patience decides the winner. So I folded the contract neatly, placed it back in the drawer, and locked it. Then I whispered to myself, let him think I don't know. Because if he thought I was blind, then maybe, just maybe, I'd get the chance to see what he was really planning, and that chance was coming sooner than I expected. The next move he made wasn't hidden in papers or contracts. It was bolder, sharper, and it came straight to my doorstep. The knock came late at night. Too late for casual visits, too sharp for comfort. I opened the door, and there he was, smiling like nothing was wrong, like it was the most normal thing in the world to show up unannounced at midnight. Got a drink? He asked, stepping inside before I even answered. I stood there for a second, watching him walk into my living room like it was his own. The audacity of it almost made me laugh, but I bit it back. Instead, I poured 2 glasses and joined him. He raised his glass and said, "To us. To the empire we're building." But I didn't drink. Not this time. I just stared at him, studying every flicker of his expression, every pause in his words. "Big meeting tomorrow," he said, leaning back. Game changer. I've already lined everything up. All you need to do is show up. The way he said it, all you need to do is show up. It stung, as if I were just a guest in my own success. As if everything we built didn't start with me. Still, I forced a smile. "You've been busy," he smirked, almost proud. "That's what friends are for, right?" That word, friends, sounded poisoned now. I wanted to ask him outright. I wanted to throw the contract in his face, demand an explanation. But a part of me knew that's what he wanted, for me to confront, to react, to reveal my hand. So instead, I nodded. Played along? Let him believe his game was working. But as he spoke, I noticed something. His phone, resting on the table, lighting up with a new notification. I caught the name before he turned it over. Not a client. Not a colleague. Someone who shouldn't be involved at all. And in that instant, I realized his betrayal wasn't just about business. It was personal. And when betrayal becomes personal, the damage doesn't stop at money or power. It cuts deeper. Much deeper. The name on his phone burned into my mind. It wasn't just any name. It was someone close, too close. Someone who had no reason to be texting him at midnight. I tried to keep my face calm, but inside, everything twisted. My pulse quickened. My thoughts raced. He noticed my glance and flipped the phone over with a casual smile as if nothing had happened. But the way he did it, too quick. Too practiced. "Don't worry about tomorrow," he said again, sipping his drink. "It's all taken care of." Those words, the same ones from his message the night before, now sounded like a warning. I nodded, pretending to believe him, but my mind was elsewhere. Who else was in on this? How long had it been going on? And most importantly, why? When he finally left, I sat alone in the silence of my living room. The glass in my hand had gone warm, untouched. I stared at the door, replaying every detail of his visit. That phone, that name, that smile. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming. Not complete yet, but close enough to see the shape of betrayal. I pulled out my own phone, scrolling through old messages, old photos, and that's when I found it. A small detail I had missed before. A date, a time. A connection between him and someone who should have never been part of this story. It wasn't just coincidence. It was deliberate. My chest tightened. My hands shook. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about money or contracts or business deals. This was about trust, intimacy, a line no one should ever cross, and he had crossed it. But I stayed quiet, because silence can be more dangerous than words. And soon, my silence would become the very trap he never saw coming. The next morning, I woke up with a different kind of weight on my shoulders. Not confusion, not doubt, clarity. I finally knew what I was dealing with. And clarity has a way of turning fear into fuel. I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was still, the hallways silent. I unlocked my door, sat at my desk, and pulled the contract out of the drawer. My eyes scanned over the altered clause again, but this time I wasn't angry. I was calculating, because now I understood. He had been building this move piece by piece, expecting me not to notice. But the thing about games is simple. Once you know you're in one, you can play too. I pulled out a fresh notebook and began writing. Notes, dates, details, every little thing he had done, every subtle shift I had ignored. By the time the sun broke through the windows, I had a map of his betrayal. And staring at that map, I realized something chilling. He wasn't acting alone. His contacts, his secret meetings, that name on his phone, they weren't side details. They were players in the same game, but I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I let him walk into the office later that morning, carrying his coffee, humming like nothing was wrong. "Big day," he said, dropping his bag. "I'll lead the pitch, you just back me up." I smiled. Calm, polite, perfectly agreeable. "Of course," I said. "You've got it handled." He grinned, completely unaware. Because what he didn't know was that while he thought he was making his biggest move today, I had already started making mine. And mine wasn't about stopping him. It was about letting him go just far enough. That when he fell, he'd fall alone. What I didn't realize, though, was that before he fell, he would drag me into a darkness I never saw coming. The meeting started like any other. A long table, polished wood. Suits lined up on both sides, their faces unreadable, waiting to be impressed. He walked in with confidence dripping from every step, carrying the presentation like it was a crown. And for a while I watched him perform. Smooth words, perfect timing, like he had rehearsed it 100 times. But then I noticed something. He wasn't just pitching our work. He was pitching himself. His language shifted, subtle but sharp. My strategy, my connections, my leadership. Every word cut me like a blade. And no one in that room seemed to notice. To them, he looked like the mastermind. To me, he looked like a thief in plain sight. I sat quietly, letting him build his performance, letting him steal the spotlight, letting him believe I was just another shadow in the room. But when one of the clients turned to me, asking a direct question, I saw the flicker in his eyes. Panic, because he didn't expect me to speak. I leaned forward, smiling politely, and gave the answer. Precise, sharp, unshakable. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. But it was enough to remind everyone at that table that I wasn't just a silent partner, and for the first time, his mask slipped. Just for a second. But I saw it. The twitch in his jaw. The way his grip tightened on the papers. The way his smile struggled to stay in place. That single moment told me everything. He wasn't just betraying me quietly anymore. He was desperate to erase me. Publicly. The meeting ended with applause, but it wasn't for him alone. And the look he gave me as we walked out wasn't the look of a friend. It was the look of a man realizing his plan might not be as airtight as he thought. We walked side by side down the hallway, silent, the air between us heavy. Finally, he said, "You went off script." I turned to him, calm, steady. Maybe there was no script. His smile faltered. And for the first time, he didn't have a quick reply. I thought I had gained the upper hand in that moment. But what I didn't know was that his next move would strike where I least expected, far from the boardroom. That night, the city lights felt colder than usual. I drove home with the window down, the noise of the street filling the silence I couldn't escape inside my own head. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I had control again. The meeting had gone well, and I had reminded him, and everyone else, that I wasn't invisible. But when I pulled into my driveway, my confidence cracked. His car was there. Parked too close. Engine still warm. I stepped out slowly, my keys clenched tight in my fist. My front door was unlocked. And when I walked in, the sound hit me before the sight did. Laughter. Familiar. Soft. Wrong. There she was, sitting in my living room. My partner. And next to her, too close, too comfortable, him. They looked up at me like nothing was out of place, like this scene was normal. His smile was casual, but her eyes couldn't hide the truth. I stood frozen in the doorway, every memory of trust crashing down at once. This wasn't just betrayal of business. This wasn't about contracts or meetings. This was my home, my heart, my life. He leaned back, unbothered, and said, "You didn't tell me you'd be home this early?" The arrogance in his voice was enough to make my blood boil. But I didn't shout. I didn't throw him out. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I smiled. Cold, sharp, deadly. Because at that moment, I realized something important. He thought he was taking everything from me. But what he really did was give me the one thing I needed most. A reason. And once betrayal becomes personal, revenge stops being an option. It becomes destiny. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger, but because of focus. I sat at my desk with the lights off, the city glowing through the window, replaying every move he had made against me. Every lie. Every stolen glance. Every "don't worry, I'll handle it." And for the first time, I wasn't asking why. I was asking how. How to turn his own game against him. How to make sure that when he fell, it wouldn't be quick and it wouldn't be quiet. Revenge isn't about rage. Rage is messy. Rage makes mistakes. No, revenge requires precision. So I started writing. Names, numbers, accounts, all the leverage he thought I didn't see. All the pieces he thought were hidden. One by one, I connected the dots. And soon I had a map of not just his betrayal, but his weakness. Because everyone has a weakness. And his wasn't money. It wasn't power. It was pride. He needed to be seen. He needed the world to believe he was the mastermind, the king, the one who built everything. That's why he had stolen from me in the first place. And that's where I'd strike. Not in silence. Not in secret. But in the spotlight he loved so much. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the map of his downfall, and whispered to myself, "You wanted everything. Now you'll watch it all burn." But planning revenge in the shadows is one thing. Walking into his world and pulling the trigger, that was a step I couldn't take back. And that moment was coming faster than I thought. The following week, he called for another meeting. Bigger this time. More people, more eyes. It wasn't just business partners now. It was investors, press, potential clients. The perfect stage, and I let him have it. I let him stand in front of that room, dressed in his best suit, smiling like the king he believed he was. He spoke with fire, selling our vision, our future, as if it was all his. The crowd ate it up. Applause, nods, excitement, it was his dream come true. And he thought I was nothing more than a shadow at his side, a supporting role in his empire. But while he performed, I slipped the first domino into place. The documents. The contracts he had altered, the emails he had hidden, the evidence of every move he made behind my back. I had them all. And with one carefully timed message, they weren't in my hands anymore. They were in the hands of someone who could not be ignored. I sat at the back of the room, watching him glow in the spotlight, watching him soak up the attention. He had no idea that the same spotlight he craved was about to expose him. When the presentation ended, the applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. He bowed his head slightly, basking in the moment. Then a voice cut through the noise. "Can you explain this?" The room went still. Papers shuffled. Screens lit up. Faces turned. And suddenly, All the eyes that had been filled with admiration were filled with doubt. His smile faltered. He stammered. Tried to explain. But the words weren't coming out as smooth as before. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched. Because this was only the beginning. He thought he was untouchable. But in that moment, he learned the truth. When your empire is built on lies, it only takes one crack to make it crumble. His voice cracked under pressure. The man who once spoke like every word was law now sounded like a stranger. Hesitant, defensive, desperate. The room buzzed with whispers. Investors leaned forward, clients exchanged uneasy looks, reporters scribbled furiously. The papers they held weren't just numbers. They were proof emails, altered contracts, transfers that had no explanation. Every piece of his betrayal laid bare, piece by piece in black and white. He tried to laugh it off, tried to spin it as misunderstandings. But his smile was gone. His charm was gone. And the one thing he relied on most, his pride, was slipping through his fingers. I watched silently, my expression unreadable. To the room, I was just another face at the table. But inside I felt the shift. The balance of power tilting back where it belonged. He looked at me once, his eyes wide, almost pleading. As if I was supposed to step in, rescue him, remind everyone that he was trustworthy, that he was still the man they believed in. But I didn't move. I didn't speak, because this wasn't my fight anymore. This was his downfall, and it was happening exactly the way I wanted, under the weight of his own lies. The questions kept coming, sharper, louder. His answers grew weaker, emptier. And when one of the investors finally said, "If this is true, you've destroyed everything we built," the silence that followed was heavier than any scream. I leaned back in my chair, calm, steady, watching the empire he tried to steal collapse around him. And still, I hadn't even played my final card, because revenge isn't complete when your enemy falls. It's complete when he realizes who pushed him. The silence in the room stretched, thick as smoke. He shifted in his seat, eyes darting to every corner, searching for a lifeline that didn't exist. That's when I stood. Chairs creaked. Heads turned. The sound of my footsteps across the polished floor was louder than his entire speech. For the first time, he looked small. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The documents I laid on the table did the talking for me. Every missing cent, every false signature. "Every lie you sold us," gasps echoed like gunfire. The weight of truth hit harder than any accusation, his face drained of color. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His lips moved like he was choking on the very lies that once built his empire. The investors weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at me, at the one who had stayed quiet, patient, watching. And then finally his eyes locked on mine. Rage, fear, shame. It all collided at once. He knew this wasn't chance. This wasn't some unlucky break. This was deliberate. This was you, he whispered, barely audible. I didn't confirm it. I didn't deny it. I simply let the silence answer for me, because the truth wasn't just about exposing him. It was about making sure he realized who had been pulling the strings all along. The empire was ashes now. And soon, he'd understand the full weight of why it had burned. Because revenge isn't about striking once. It's about making them watch as every last piece of their world falls apart. Until you deliver the final blow. He slumped in his chair, clutching the last threads of an empire that no longer existed. Papers scattered across the table like broken glass, each one cutting deeper than the last. The room wasn't his anymore. The spotlight had shifted, and every eye in that hall watched him unravel. "Do you know what the worst part is?" I finally said, my voice steady, calm, almost too calm. "It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the money. It was that you thought you'd never be caught. That you thought you were smarter than everyone else in this room." He shook his head slowly, still refusing to believe this was real. But reality doesn't care if you believe in it. Security entered. The investors didn't speak, didn't argue, didn't hesitate. They had their proof and they had their scapegoat. His scapegoat was gone. And now, it was him. They dragged him to his feet, his protests growing louder, more desperate. The man who once boomed with confidence now begged like a child. As he was escorted out, his gaze found me again. This time, no rage, no arrogance, just pure, hollow defeat. I leaned closer, close enough for only him to hear. You built your kingdom on lies. I built mine on patience. That's the difference. And just like that, he was gone. The door shut. His legacy erased in a single night. But me? I didn't need applause. I didn't need thanks. My victory wasn't in their cheers. It was in his silence. In knowing he'd spend the rest of his days wondering how long I had been planning this. And what else I had in store. Because revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, precise, and unforgettable. And as his world turned to ashes, mine was only beginning to glow. What about you? If you were in this situation, would you have exposed him the same way, or walked away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it.